So thanks for the invite. So my name is Ryan from Generation On. We're a national service learning organization that has really deep roots in New York, where is the national headquarters, Texas, and then Indiana. So we have this really cool Generation On Indiana chapter that keeps schools really involved. So then my part of that is to take 30 to 40 schools across Indiana and implement service learning past the 101 level. So sure, we can do an introduction, but really how do you connect the service pieces to the core academics? Because the service gives you really cool engagement of kids, so then how do we capitalize on the engagement? And that's with the rigorous academics. So that's really my charge and kind of my passion. Started out at Decatur, 8 years of 8th grade English. Created a project-based learning school within a school that then wove service learning into that PBL model. So I still claim that really great PBL is service learning in the core, because you're solving an authentic problem out in the community. So with that, I kind of jumped out of the classroom 2 years ago to do this work and some PBL work and some local missions work to make all that sustainable for me and my family. So with that, I think you've got probably some differing ideas of what service learning might look like. I think there's some really cool Google time that I think you're using. So I'm just going to show you some resources that we offer that will all be free and accessible, that your kids can engage in, that you can engage in right away and right off the bat. So this is the Generation On website. If you go to the Educators tab, you've got a couple different options. You can log in to get updates on service learning projects, to get mini-grant opportunities. Also just helps us come back to our grantors with some outcomes, and we can kind of track what our teachers are doing, all the really cool stuff you're doing with your kids. So there's a couple key components. This track and share, I think, is the largest asset to you as a classroom teacher. You've got service stories here. And these are just stories that have been uploaded by schools across the country, and these are the projects that they've done. So if you're looking to get past the canned food drive on Thanksgiving, which is a really great piece and really helps people, but you want to get into some cool intergenerational storytelling and biography writing. You want to get into, one of my favorites is going to the park and digging up invasive species, which science people really geek out on, right? The rest of us don't really care about weeds, but science people are it's invasive and it shouldn't be here. So right, you go and you lead the charge out. So there's a lot of really innovative ideas that have happened across the country, and this is a great way to engage in those. And there's a teens tab that will also give you service stories. That they're categorized by topic. So here they are. So you got animal welfare, education, bullying, health and wellness. So if you're looking to engage student voice and choice into what you're doing, this is a great way to do that with some boundaries, right? Free student voice and choice equals anarchy, right? That's not so great. But student voice and choice with some parameters is a really great positive thing that brings engagement. So I see this site as a great place to say, hey, where do you guys want to engage in your passion? But it gives them some parameters to work from. If we come back to the Educators tab, there's one other piece that you might want, you might not be interested in, that's fine too. But there's a service learning tracker. So if you guys decide, hey, we're all in and we want to be a Generation On school, which again, free designation comes with some perks. One of those is that we can track all of your service learning projects as a school. So as each teacher is doing individual projects in their classroom, or hopefully collaborating to do some really cool interdisciplinary projects, that all gets uploaded to a school account as far as hours, projects, recording, what is it that you're doing. And it's a really cool piece as you look past the year. Instead of thinking, man, what did we do back in August? I think it was really cool. You have this really detailed list of here's what we did. Here's the hours that we've accumulated, and here are all the projects that we've done. The other piece that we try to bring is we partner with Learning to Give, and these are philanthropic lesson plans. So they're all teacher generated, and they're pretty well organized. So you can go to high school, you go to language arts and science. Let's say you're going to do an environmental project, so you click on E, and now you have 51 lessons on the environment. And these are all units that have lessons within them. So be the change you want for your community. it's created by high school teachers, right? So I have some really cool third grade projects where they make these raised garden beds, but you probably don't want those, right? You want them to be individualized for your classroom, and you can do that. And Learning to Give is great because it's got 1,700 plus lesson plans. It's got, and they're all teacher generated by teachers from Indiana or Michigan, because they're headquartered in Michigan. But with the presence of Service Learning in Indiana, you have this really cool piece that we've kind of created these lesson plans. So they're very applicable to our work. They're standards-based. You can search by standard, but we know that those kind of things change constantly, so I don't usually advocate for that. But just know that they did start at the standards and then create a project. It's not just go clean a park for the sake of cleaning a park. It's connected to the academic piece, which is super important. And then from there, you probably don't want to just take a unit and run with it, but you can come through. The format's the same in all of these. So you have the purpose first, you've got duration, how long did that teacher think it would take, objectives that the teacher that created it is looking for, what service experience is connected. All the materials are in the unit or the lesson. So if they have a handout, it's in there. If there's a website, it's linked. And then there's this instructional procedure piece that for me is just way too detailed, but the idea is you want to get in the head of the teacher that created it and what were they thinking. So you've got an anticipatory set in there. In some cases it's literally kind of this is what you should say, in this case to start the day. Now I'm not going to say that you should pick this up and go word for word, but I would say that it's going to give you a really good idea of what the teacher thinks should happen in there, and you can see if you agree, right? And then there's assessment piece connected, and if you just like the idea, you can go to the bibliography and just see where did they get their resources. Each unit has 1, 2, 3, 4 lessons connected to it, so you can come over and poach these pieces from different units as well, which again I would absolutely advocate for. Like you just find what fits what you're doing, and then you can go from there. Again, they've got the same handout, or they've got the same format, and they've got all the handouts connected to that. If you really want to geek out on service learning pieces, they've got a philanthropic standards that you can work through. So I've got some schools that really love that, and so right next to their academic standards, they have a philanthropic standard that they're trying to address. Might be another place to inject some voice and choice for kids. Which philanthropic standard do you want to engage? But you have to get pretty geeky in service learning, which I am, so I advocate for that. They're going to be redoing their website, but really great place for to bring some curriculum into your classroom really quick. That has a philanthropic basis. If you don't have a specific piece in mind, there's some general intro to philanthropy type pieces, like why should you give your time, talent, and treasure, that you can start with. That's just a good place to start conversations, I think. So of all the pieces that I kind of use around the state, this is the piece that most teachers see as an asset they can use right away. Because again, they're lesson plans that are created by teachers, so you can kind of take them and run with them. Really, the search engine's pretty intuitive. For student voice and choice again, there's moments of service. So this is lesson plans divvied up by month. So if you know that you're going to do a civil rights piece, or you're going to do some work with justice, and well, you missed it. But if you wanted to hit MLK Day, right? That's in there for January. Or if you want to hit, Valentine's Day, there's a thing you can do, Valentine's for seniors, right? So you look in there, like this is the month where we're really going to hammer service learning, whatever that looks like in your classroom. This is another place to go. So the way I use that in the classroom was just to say that was part of the rubric. So as you're giving kids student voice and choice, I need to know that you thought about why you're doing this service learning project. So I had 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders up around 38th Street, Project Libertas, and they were just really cool thinking projects. So they had a community meal they wanted to do. They wanted to give a free meal, and they did it on MLK Day. I said, well, why did you guys pick that? And they picked it because other IPS schools were not going to be in session. So if you've got a high population of free and reduced lunch, those kids are depending on that meal. School's not in session, they're not getting that meal. So these 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders had this really cool conversation about how there was this need that they wanted to authentically fill. Wow, right? And then we tied it into MLK and all of his initiatives as well, and they knew a ton of stuff there too. So it was really getting to the why, and I think that moments of service can guide some of those pieces, like why you should be doing service project at a particular time. So those are kind of some of the resources that we have to offer. Some pieces that I can continue to work with you all on we work, sometimes I come in grade level wise, individual teacher wise, service learning team wise, and just kind of walk through the process of planning. I kind of advocate that it's really just, it takes a little tweak in planning of how you connect academics to service learning. You know, you're going to go clean the park, so why not track what it is you're cleaning and then divvy up recyclables versus the garbage, and then you can create really cool bar graphs and figure out what you need to buy in order to make sure that you don't pollute the park again. Right? So it's a small tweak in the planning process that builds a lot of engagement, and then you can really pour on a ton of rigorous material because you have really cool service learning engagement. So there you go. Questions, comments, concerns? How can we make this fit? Can I turn this off now for questions, or do I continue? So okay, so we'll continue. So those of you that are watching via video.
I'm not sure how to edit either. So.
Oh man, so all this is going to be on there? Do you have any questions? It's impossible for you to ask them, but.
Yeah, I think it might pick up our voices.
Okay. Well, do you guys have questions or ways to use some of this? Maybe would be a good place to start. Is there a place that?
My question is,
okay.
If a teacher decides to use Generation On to track and everything, what can they expect as far as anything coming from Generation On into their inbox or what have you?
Yeah, right. So when you register, you've got all the boxes that you should not click, right, if you don't want to get bombarded. But for the most part, Generation On Indiana is an option on there, so you get an email a month probably from Joan with mini grant opportunities, local pieces, moments of service that you can connect to. If you really want to jump into service learning and learn, you can check like 10 different boxes, and you can get stuff from the national organization, clubs, more information than you could ever use. We will provide that for you, but if you don't check those boxes, you don't get it. So again, signing up is free. You really don't get bombarded with spam unless you ask for it. The tracking piece probably adds about 20 minutes to your reflection piece. So you've done your service learning project. And it can be a real barrier, I understand that, because you've gone above and beyond to create the service learning project, connect to your community partner. It worked, I didn't lose any kids, this is great. And then I have to track it too? I don't have time for that, I'm moving on, right? But for 20 minutes, it's really a cool piece because you start to build this resume, not necessarily for you, but for your kids in your classroom. So you can say, this is what we did last year to the next group. And they can be inspired by that, and they can add to, they can reflect and revise. As well as how can your school as a whole use some of those, honestly, marketing pieces of here's our community service, this is how we're reaching out to community members, and that can be a powerful piece too. You can have kids fill out the service tracker piece too. You know,
That's only with the login, the tracking piece, right?
Right. So you have to have a login, and really, if you do that, you know, I think you're already a Generation On School, right, Steve?
I think.
Right. So you're signed up. So then, once you log in and you're signed in and you decide to track, you can connect to Fishers High School, and then you're already, and that's like one extra button. So then automatically, as soon as you put it up, you're uploading to the rest of the school. So that's not an extra step. So you would see your individual projects, and then as a school, you can see your summative projects.
You said something about the mini grants. Can you only get that information if you're logged in and join, or can you view that on the website?
So you need to log in and join in order to get that, and then you'll get an email from my colleague that will say, hey, here's a mini grant for this month. The grant opportunity, I should talk about the grant process because it's ridiculously simple. It's a form stack, just like a SurveyMonkey. If you fill it out wrong, like I filled my first one out very wrong and just like didn't, it was awful. So Joan just emailed me back and said, Ryan, you forgot this part, you need to completely change this and you should add this. I sent a grant out and it didn't like disappear into grant land, right? Like it came back and I got feedback. That's the first time ever, right? So then I did that and then I got the grant. So and it would be the same process. You just say, you know what, here's what we're trying to do. You know, here's what we think could happen. And and Joan might say, you know what, I don't even see the service in that. What are you guys doing? But she'll give you an opportunity to say, could you explain what the service piece looks like? What are kids really going to be doing? How are you going to connect it to academics? You revise that, send it back to her, and then we award you the grant. The grant's a very So you have to do a service tracker if you do receive a grant, because we need to report back on those pieces to our funders, which is the majority of that is the Lilly Endowment. Thank you, Lilly Endowment, if you're watching. So in that piece, there is a tracking piece that we would ask of you, but again, that's mostly to report back. But how you use those funds is very much up to you. One piece I really love about Generation On is it's really about getting kids out and doing service. So it's not about 10% of that can go to stationery, 20% can go for this, it can't go to that. I mean, essentially you can't pay yourself a stipend, but outside of that, you can do a lot of things. You can bring people in, you can use it for buses. I had one group that actually, they bought a digital camera to record what they're doing. Okay, great, right? Because then you're going to send us pictures. We can send that back. That can be part of our objectives back to our funders the next time. That's a positive for us. So if that works for you, great. Let's do that. I, of course, advocate for pieces that are sustainable. So like a camera makes a lot of sense to me because you can use that for this project and the next project and the next project. You know, if you decide to buy some supply, like I just use your money the best you can, right? And make sure that make it sustainable. If it's not, okay, that's up to you. You know, but those grants are available, and they're, I don't know if I should say easy to get, but they are. Like, it's not like those 6 hours that you spend on a grant and it goes off in a grant line and you never hear from it again. You'll hear from us. We're on the east side, so.
Do these need to be whole class service projects? Because we have a lot of students who are doing Genius Hour,
right.
Several of us this year. So we have kids that are doing their own thing. They found something that they're feeling passionate about, but it is service learning, many of them.
Right.
And in the way that they're doing, can you track that kind of stuff, or is it only if the whole class is participating in one event together?
Right. So good point. Good question. One, as students are creating those, I would push their thinking to say, how can you get more people involved because you have a greater impact. Two, the way I would approach that is to say, hey, Ryan, here's what our class is doing during our Genius Hour. Can I get $250 to do that? I don't know exactly what the projects are going to look like, and then you kind of become the granting agency, right? So you're going to offer these $50 grants out of there to different projects. So $250 for one student project where they just do one thing probably doesn't fit the bill, right? We need a little bit, probably looking for more impact. But if you say, Ryan, we're going to, I don't know about everybody, but right, you get that idea. We're going to have several different applications, essentially. Here are some possible topics we're thinking about. Okay, these all fit in the realm of Generation On. Great. Let us know what happens, right? So that sounds like a really cool piece, I think. So,
could you give us some ideas of just any recent service learning grant things you've heard about going on? Just an example.
Sure. So intergenerational pieces have been really cool lately. So going to seniors and really capturing their stories, and then creating those biography pieces is really strong. There's a really cool program that I'm kind of pushing right now called Cyber Seniors, where your high school students are teaching seniors Facebook, email, some of those pieces that they don't know, but your students are experts in, right, because they use them every day. Super cool, a lot of good resources for that. That's a lot of fun. Third graders creating garden beds is always a positive, right? Little kids carrying cinder blocks, but right, which is really dangerous. Like at first it was no, and then it was like, I think you got it. Okay, let's try. Let's see what happens. They're your kids. Is it okay? Oh, sorry, but the cool thing they did is they really asked the seniors, like, what kind of vegetables do you want, right? So they looked for voice and choice from their seniors because they got voice and choice in what they do. So that was a pretty neat piece to see, and just pushing their thinking. Some other cool pieces.
A crudité bar.
I'll take that. Let's do it all.
Right, like, yeah, some cool health and wellness stuff comes out as far as advocacy. Bullying pieces are always big. You know, kids don't want to see other kids get bullied, so they create different initiatives. Again, I always push, like, what's the local context? So I was up in Monticello today, and they really want to adopt service learning, and they kind of asked the same question, like, what are people doing? And my pushback is, what does your community need, right? Because it's going to be different from Monticello to Fishers. So, you know, a needs analysis would be a really cool piece for your kids to start with, right? Identify the true problems that are there, and then from there bounce off and what works. Because if you guys don't have senior centers that are close and connected to your school somehow, the cyber seniors isn't quite as cool and it's not quite as accessible. You're forcing that piece because it is cool, but so really start with the needs of your community first, so that you make sure you're fulfilling authentic needs and not pushing them. But it doesn't mean you can't be inspired by other people's pieces. So it's
right. Go to the Generation On website. You could put kids there first in Genius Hour to get ideas of what other kids are thinking.
Right.
And then possibly connect, have resources for that sort of work.
Right, but I would still advocate for pushing them towards the needs as well. Like, make sure, does that fit needs of our community? So, good question.
Any other questions?
Oh, I know, about the grants. Back
Yes.
to the grants.
Yep.
Like, is there is there a minimum, maximum amount of these mini grants? Or do you kind of
Right, so like,
write that I need $1,000.
Right.
This is why I need $1,000, and then you send it out.
and it just magically appears.
And then $1,000.
Right. So typically 100, 150, 200, 250. 250 is really the top. So so that's why we call it a mini grant. So 250 is where we top out. The idea is really to get you started and inspired and going, and then as you grow, then you start to tap into some other resources. What else did I want to say on that, though? Oh, the other piece would be how many can we give, like, one school, right? So there is a limited piece that we get from Lilly. It's not quite the unlimited funder. So the way we weigh that is, again, we're going to report out in our objectives back to the Lilly Endowment of here's where we put your resources and why, and here are the results of that. So the impact that you have probably directly will correlate to the grants that you can receive. So some of our metrics are Generation On teachers that are registered. So the more that you register, kind of the more we can justify giving more funds to you, and then you can report back on your larger impact. And that's not a direct correlation. Like, we don't have a formula for that. Like, if you're doing really cool stuff and you need some extra funds, we work with you, right? And the reporting back piece, though, is really important. So if we give, like, we've given mini grants to some schools before and then we don't really hear back from them, or we're pulling information from them, probably not going to give you another mini grant, right? Because you're not really communicating back well. So as you communicate back well with us, that's a positive for us and our relationship, which is what it should really be. So we look for, like, what are your student outcomes? Can we see some pictures? Always, right, obviously speak volumes. Do you have written reflection from kids that we can share? Can we write an article about your project? And then, that's another piece that I think we can do, is I'm trying to do some more spotlight pieces on projects, especially innovative projects that especially connect to academics, because I think that's where we should go with this work. So can we spotlight and write an article and then post that? Like, you should have service stories up on the website, right? And so how can we document that and make sure that you get up there? So again, depending on how engaged you want to get, I think we can go pretty far with it.
You mentioned the Lilly Endowment.
Mm-hmm.
Who else helps you guys?
So our national organization is called Points of Light, which is a national philanthropic organization. So, so there's a piece, although we've kind of created our own entity within Indiana, so a lot of it is, we are more Lilly Endowment funded now than we used to be even, but we are connected to the national organization some as well. And then Generation On is that youth arm of Points of Light. So, but Lilly Endowment is our primary funder.